Greetings and salutations, and welcome to this series of videos on the evolution of life on land, or terrestrial life. Let's start off our series of videos by looking at ecosystems on land, or terrestrial ecosystems. So it always makes sense to define terms at the beginning, so I've put for you here onto this slide a basic definition of terrestrial, which is related to or living or growing in or on land. That's great. That is largely accurate. But actually, when it comes to doing science and trying to understand life on land more broadly and in deep time, we need possibly a slightly more precise definition than that. And I've put one on the slide for you here, which is we consider terrestrial ecosystems to be anything that is non-marine. This includes dry land surface, bedrock and soils, swamps and bogs, and aquatic standing and running fresh water. So this means that based on that definition, which most people use when discussing terrestrialization, that's how things move from living in the oceans to living on land, that our terrestrial ecosystems include not just life on the surface of the land, such as these trees shown on the left and on continents, but also in water on that land, such as in lakes. An example is shown of a loch in Scotland on the right-hand side here. It's Loch Assynt, if you're interested. So terrestrial ecosystems, that's ecosystems associated with land, have been occupied throughout most of the Phanerozoic. The shape and patterns of change are actually similar to those that we see in the marine biosphere, but they're not always synchronous. That means that they don't always occur at the same time. For example, complex land-based ecosystems appear more than 100 million years later than the first varied animal marine communities. There's a lag between the appearance of animals and their invasion of the land. The typical trophic structure, that means the structure of these ecosystems, who eats what, for example, that's typical structure of modern type terrestrial ecosystems had probably developed by about the Permian period, so before 250 million years ago. So we've got a really interesting period for terrestrialization of animals in the Paleozoic, and the time since that has been characterized by shifts in vegetation structure, developments in herbivory, and fine-tuning of plant and animal interactions. And that's what we're going to be learning about over the course of these videos. But it makes sense to quickly introduce a number of the macroscopic organisms that live on land. So do be aware in this little introduction that I'm giving you that I'm skipping a wealth of important single-celled organisms that really do make major contributions to life on land. But there's only so much I can fit into one of these lectures, so so be it. So as you can see on this slide, we have a number of different organisms that we find on land. And let me tell you that each one of these we think was a separate terrestrialization. These came onto land separately from each other. These include lichens, shown on the left-hand side here. That's a symbiotic association of a fungus and an alga or a cyanobacteria. So it's actually two organisms that are symbiotic with each other. In the middle, you can see some examples of slime molds. These are single-celled eukaryotes, so they have nuclei in their cells, but they have a really complex and really interesting life cycle that if you want to know more about it, feel free to ask me sometime. I love talking about slime molds. And on the right-hand side are fungi. Fungi are a major component of all ecosystems on land today. So all of those came onto land separately from marine ancestors. You can see some major divisions of the plants on these slides. And let me tell you that plants came onto land in a single terrestrialization event, and that their evolution has largely seen plants moving from being reliant on water for their reproduction to less so. And the examples that I've put for you here include mosses, ferns, and flowering plants, which actually appear in the fossil record in the same order that I just told you about them. That's another terrestrialization. And animals are experts at moving from marine ecosystems onto land. Animals have come onto land multiple times. Each image on this slide is a separate terrestrialization event. The animals that you can see on this slide include, on the top left, the arachnids. One across from that are the insects. Across from that are the woodlice. Those are isopods. Those are crustaceans like crabs and shrimp and lobster that have evolved to live on land. Next to those are a series of wormy creatures that have moved onto land separately. They include annelids, those are earthworms, onychophorans, those are velvet worms. And on the far right-hand side there, you can see an example of a snail. A snail's a gastropod, and they love to come onto land. They've come onto land in multiple different ways. Other land animals that have come onto land separately from all of those things that I just mentioned include the millipedes. You can see one in the bottom row, roughly in the middle here. It's actually, there's a group called the myriapods, which are millipedes and centipedes and a couple of smaller groups that are probably a single terrestrialization event. To the left of that millipede, these are the tardigrades, wonderful little animals that are closely related to the spiders, the insects, and the onychophorans. And you can see a black and white picture of one of those there. And then on the bottom left here, you can see a vertebrate on land. Now, all of these organisms have evolved from marine ancestors and have moved on to land at some point in the last 450 or so million years. In these videos that I'm recording for you now, we're not going to be looking at the full diversity of life on land because there's just not enough time. And I would love to talk about it in more depth, but you probably wouldn't love that. So rather, I will be just speaking about some specific clades of multicellular eukaryotes over the course of the coming videos. So just bear in mind that I'm skipping quite a lot of really interesting groups. I just wanted to finish this video, though, by asking, why should we care? Why do we bother learning this? Well, as you can see, actually, land animals are an incredibly diverse and really important group. Based on the reference on the slide here, Grossberg et al. In 2012, there were 1.5 million species of macroscopic organisms on Earth, so that's multicellular organisms. The modern ocean supports only 15% of those species, despite having a larger area and volume. Terrestrial environments account for about 80% of species, and freshwater the remaining 5%. That is reflected in this diagram I've created for you here. You can see that of all described species, insects make up well more than half. Of the remaining known species, probably a third to a half are arachnids, that's spiders and scorpions and their kin. And another really diverse group are the nematodes. Their diversity is very poorly understood, but there are lots of those on land as well. So that's really important. If we care about understanding evolution, then we should care about the evolution of terrestrial forms, and a key part of that is how they came onto land. You may, of course, be asking me, why is this? Why is it that these land animals and other organisms are so very diverse? Well, it's perhaps because land represents a very varied environment. It's three-dimensionally complex, and it's fragmented, and it has a wide range of conditions, meaning there are lots of ecological niches, and that means that it can support quite a wide range of diversity. It could also be that the differences in the properties of air and water play a part in that diversity. If you think about, for example, signaling on land versus in the ocean, they'll be very, very different, and as will a host of other environmental factors like temperatures and gradients of many kinds. And finally, I thought I'd highlight that as well as this being important from a scientific perspective, because these are so diverse and they're really good to understand evolution, it also matters because we are land animals and we live on land. What we're talking about is the evolution of the world outside our windows. Trying to point there, you probably can't see. Right out there, yeah. This is the world outside us. Much of our food is grown on land. It's pollinated by land animals, and pests are land animals. So are many of the vectors of diseases that affect us. So for all of these reasons, understanding the rich diversity of life on land and its origins is a really interesting and really important topic. And we're going to cover that over the series of the next videos in largely a chronological fashion after looking at some adaptations for life on land, which will be in the next video. So I will see you there in just a second.